Welcome, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the September 19th, 2023 work session to order. I want to thank all the staff for being here and moving us along today. I look like we have 3 items on the agenda, and I'm expecting we can be done by 3. That sound cool?
I'd love 5.
5 o'clock. Okay, we'll go for 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
All right. With that in mind, I'll turn it over to the guy who can control this all, interim manager, Sean Burke.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So our first item is pretty quick, and then we'll dive into the budget presentation. So first, to get it started, I'll turn it over to Shannon. I think this should be a pretty quick item. Council talk about the ability of funding.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. This was really presented to you on September 12th at your town council meeting. You're all behind, most of you will come up. The request is to continue our work with NCDOT on that estimate. So just a reminder, we just completed the transit-oriented development study. We're about to begin a partnership for the feasibility study for our mobility hub. And they are pursuing grant funding that would bring Apex's mobility hub to final design. So all pre-construction or pre-right-of-way activities complete. So the motion, requested motion before you today is to approve a resolution of support and to authorize Sean to sign a letter of commitment that would be for a 20% match for that grant. So that would be $460,000 to complete the mobility hub for Apex through final design. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions for Ms. Cox?
Where would the 460 be covered from? Would it come out of our reserves?
Well, so I'll let Amanda respond to that, but I will say NCDOT indicated that we can spread this out over multiple budget years.
We could put.
Right. We don't, the plans, because we definitely don't need it this year, maybe next year. So the commitment, if the council wants to do this, the commitment would be where letter of commitment. And then what that would do is basically give us the mandate to make sure it's included in the CIP moving forward. It may be reserves, it may be something we'll get halfway in the budget. So it depends on the timing, how far in the future and how many years you expect that.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Cox. All right, so we have the motion presented to us.
Motion approved.
Motion to approve.
Second that.
Second, Zuckerman. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. All right, passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so next up, the bulk of what we've talked about today is with our electric operation utility. Eric's going to run through quite a bit of information. It is a lot, but I think that it's important. The idea will, this will give you a good background of what you're looking at. This is all part of us trying to make sure we're prepared for the future, make sure we're planning for our growth, what we're seeing, not just in the physical growth of the town, but also how the market's changing on for electric. And when I say the market's changing, solar, the EV, I mean, there's increasing demand on our system. So we have multiple demands on our system, from whether it's new technology, whether it's just natural growth, and whether it's just maintaining the sustainability of what we already have. So Eric's going to go through a lot of these changes, what these challenges may be, and then we are going to ask for some direction. There may not be exactly specific motions that we take today, unless you have people who understand that. But most of it's just looking for direction so we can continue to plan, continue to move forward. These are things you will definitely see come budget time, whether it shows up in CIP. When we really start talking rates today, we're not talking rates. Those are things that will come up. That way, when that happens, you will have all this background to understand why there might be recommendations for this project or this finance or this policy or this rate. That's what we're trying to do, is kind of establish that infrastructure.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so as Sean mentioned, this is really, there's not a whole lot of decisions that we're asking you to make today, but really more some education on some of the issues, so you have a better understanding, and we can start putting that together as far as direction for us, because it's going to require a lot of work to head down those paths, and we can't head down multiple ones. So we want to head down the one that you referred to now, and you'll at least be aware of sort of some of the ramifications of the decision. I'm going to ask, I know there's a lot of information here, and I know any one of these slides you can stop at any one moment and want to talk in depth, and I'd love to do that, but I got to be home sometime before midnight. I can continue all that. Oh, okay. So if you could maybe make notes on the slide where you have a question when we get to the end, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that may be answered later on. So let's get through it real quick at least once. I think you'll get a good idea of sort of where we're trying to go and sort of the decisions. And then as time allows, we'll get into a little bit more detail. So,
Thank you for that. Yeah.
so we're going to go through sort of an overview of our bulk power, sort of how we buy it and why that's important to the decisions that follow as far as rate structures and technologies. We're going to talk about a lot of the distribution system investments that we need to make as a town to stay competitive and to face some of the challenges coming up. We'll talk about some load management. You'll see clearly in how we buy power why load management is important. And we'll start some discussions into building structure. And then of course, at the end, we'll have some direction, sort of what are our asks from you going forward in reference to all this data that we put up here as far as policy and direction. Hopefully we get that all done in the next 4 hours. Next. Okay, so some of the things we're going to be talking about and we're going to want some direction is we'll get into more of it, but we got 10 megawatts of distributed resources that Apex is allowed to generate. And we'll get a little bit more what that means, but we'll talk about what that looks like for us. System expansion, we've got some plans on how we need to expand our system. Obviously, we're growing. And there's a lot of disruptive technologies, I'll call EVs, solar, and all that is playing into this, and we need to plan for it if we want to effectively integrate them. The general structure of our rates, town-owned EV charger rate structure. You'll see a little bit of discussion about that and solar rate structure. So so everybody understands, this is a copy of our wholesale bill from Duke Energy / electricities. And the only thing I want to point out is that 2/3 of our bill is that demand cost right there. That demand cost, and we'll get into a little bit more about it, but 2/3 of our monthly bill is the demand. So when we focus our discussions on rates, we got to understand trying to recoup 2/3 of your bill through 1/3 of your usage historically served us well because patterns were very predictable. Today, they are not predictable. So, and it's not working in our favor, but that's what I wanted to focus you on this. Our bills are most of the time 2/3 demand, 1/3 energy. So net demand, as we'll show you in the next slide, is registered, and we don't know when that day is. Duke will tell us at the end of the month, going back that previous month, what day they found their peak. And what I did was I sort of graphed Duke Energy's peak right there. So that is on that day. It shows you their load pattern on their system, and then it shows you Apex's. For this particular day, and it doesn't always happen that they look almost identical. Our weekends, our load patterns look a little different. We're highly residential. We're not heavy commercial industrial. So they have certain differences on weekends, holidays. Their peak could be anywhere. Doesn't necessarily follow our peak. But just to show you, that green line indicates that was the day they told us we're going to take that reading. We don't know what day it is. At the end of the month, they tell us we're going to go to this time and this date. We're going to pick that line. We're going to go up. They're going to read Apex's peak bill, and they're going to say, that's your demand charge. That's 2/3 of our bill that day. So anything we can do to reduce this. Now, you see the way this thing is offset? That's not natural. That's all part of our load management program. We were able to drop that. So typically, this would be smoothed right out. I mean, it'll be nice and smooth. Normally, it gets flattened out. You also notice Duke does that too. They're smart people too. They want to make sure you know, that's a combination of the municipals and everybody else feeding into lowering that peak. So anything we can do to reduce that can save us money. And this 10 megawatts we're going to talk about, we have an additional capability to drop that another 10 megawatts through what we're going to be recommended coming up. Next slide. Okay, I'm just going to briefly touch on here because I know we always talk about solar and its contributions and all this kind of stuff. This is a typical solar profile for a typical day. And all I wanted to show on this particular screen is those green lines are where we see our peak. That one line that determines 2/3 of our bill is determined during these periods right here, whether it's spring, fall, summer, winter. It's going to fall typically within these periods here. This is the output of typical solar array. And they go a little bit different. They're talking about orientations and all that. If you optimize your orientation, whatever. Didn't really want to get into that. I just wanted to show you so everybody understands when we talk about reducing our peak through solar, this is what your solar output's doing. So you're only getting a very small portion. And this is very conservative. Quite honestly, these graphs were put together by a solar company. To tell you what solar companies do, they try to sit there and hedge their bets on how well this thing's working. In reality, in the winter, in the morning, you're getting a lot of frost. Those things aren't putting out anything until they get blasted with sun. Although they say they're putting it out and in a perfect condition, if there's nothing on that solar panel, that doesn't happen around here. You look at your grass in the morning and take a look at the frost on it. That's going to be on your solar panels until they melt, and that's going to decrease these things. So I just say that to point out that we're really looking at any sort of contribution to solar is at the edges. Next slide. So I recreated these slides. You've probably seen them before. This was done by our study. And really what they did was they said, hey, we're going to plot your peaks throughout the year and show you where they fell every month compared to a typical solar output. And what you'll notice, again, it confirms what I just showed you on the previous slide. You go to the next slide, as we march through the year, you see sometimes it even gets worse. You know, we get some of them that are just really, really poor. So that's the reality that we're dealing with when we're looking at solar to affect our peak. Next slide. Okay, so there was a change. Part of that Duke negotiations, they came out with a whole new structure. Our full requirements contract now will allow Apex, based on this new calculation, to put upwards of 10 megawatts presently on our system if we want to generate it. And Duke is okay with that. And I put the little asterisks, you know, full requirements, just so you understand, we buy all of our power from Duke Energy. And the big caveat, remember back in December when they were starting the rolling blackouts, we didn't even get a phone call saying, hey, you guys need to be prepared. Part of our full requirements is they're going to satisfy us. Right? So they're going to roll their blackouts on their system. We're going to still get it. So we're sort of risk mitigated through this contract, but there's also a price to pay for that, right? It didn't come free, the fact that they're not going to black us out. But as part of that contract, we can now generate up to 10 megawatts. We're gonna wonder, how do we intend to use that? And that's going to be one of those questions you guys are going to think. And we're going to show you a couple of slides, some recommendations of what we think we're going to do. But we're going to want to know what to do. And again, just so you understand, that 10 megawatts, the way our bill is presently structured, translates into $230,000 a month of savings every time we push that button. So it pays for itself. I mean, it's got to pay back, regardless of what technology we look at. Minus solar, it'll pay itself back. So just understand that. Next slide. So here's some of the options. And again, I throw out, don't get too hung up on the cost. The cost, the devil's in the details. There's so many ways to structure this. But in general, these are the generic numbers when you look at trying to evaluate that technology at a 10 megawatt size site. We got battery storage, which is the one we will be talking about a little bit more. We think that's probably the best one for us right now. Natural gas generators. Again, there's a lot of history in those things. They work. There's upsides and downsides. And I really don't want to get into the individual technologies and what adders or subtractors for each of these, but natural gas generators, there's also diesel generators. We didn't put that up there. We do have access to some large natural gas lines. Gas turbine generators, another technology. Some of the some of the municipals are using it. I believe Wilson might have a gas turbine generator. There's one or two that have gas turbine generators. You know, if you're not familiar with a gas turbine generator, that's what this is. It's a jet engine. It's just a jet engine. They use them on all, pretty much most of the non-nuclear ships are all jet engine generated. Great, low cost, fast speed up, maintenance on them is pretty high. So while it looks cheaper, you gotta understand that there's, as I said, I don't want to get into it, but there's reasons why you look at that and say, oh, we go with the $7 million. Oh, there's a lot of other factors involved. And then there's also this sell or lease these credits. Now, we said it's not feasible at this time. Right now, there's an option. We could sell these to another municipal that wants to make use of them. So it doesn't cost us anything to do it and get some money for it. Talking to electricities right now, because of this new ruling, everybody's got so much generation available to them, there's no value to it. Not to say down the road there won't be some value to these, but right now they say they can't sell. Nobody would want them. But it's always an option to look at down the road if we still have them available. And as time goes on, that 10 megawatts that we get from Duke, according to the formula, is going to go up based on our percentages of growth within the municipal environment. Apex is obviously growing a lot faster than most of the other municipals in the territory. We're going to get a lion's share more of that. So, you know, if we're good at doing this and we come up with a good technology, we'll be able to exploit it even more down the road. So that's another thing. When we think about a technology, we also want to be able to say, how can we expand this technology? Because we don't want to add 4 or 5 different sites. We want to be able to take that site, and as we get another 2 megawatts, be able to handle that, add it on, and try to recoup some savings in it. We don't need new control systems and all that kind of stuff. And I put this note down here. The reason why solar, and we'll get into a little bit more with battery storage, solar is non-dispatchable. You need to be able to flip that thing on and count 10 megawatts immediately. If you remember where that peak is, it's on the shoulder. So for us to get 10 megawatts at that shoulder means we'd have to put a whole bunch of solar to get to that 10 megawatts. We'll show you a slide on the bottom there. You know, we turn around and we'll show you pictorially what 10 megawatts looks like as far as land use and solar in the Apex system. Next slide. So battery storage. So the reason we like this, it's very dispatchable, it's very reliable. You know, if we flip the switch, we're going to discharge those batteries as long as they're fully charged. And they are going to provide us 10 megawatts for as long as we want. And again, we're going to have to design that system, whether it's a 2-hour system, a 3-hour window, depends on how much risk we want to assume. Because remember, we don't know when the Duke peak is. We can estimate it. We think that they got a hot day. We've got electricity who's watching that load, and they do a really good job. They miss a peak maybe once every 2 years. Is on average, they miss it once every 2 years. So with that kind of record, we feel pretty comfortable that we can probably go with a 2-hour battery storage window. But if we get a 3-hour battery storage window, we'll reduce our risk even more of losing that one day. We could structure that contract, and again, getting creative when I told you the cost. There's battery storage companies that are willing to finance everything, and we can pay it back through our savings. Now, of course, that's going to increase our payback period. And one of the things that's always an unknown and a risk we'll have to understand is that you can change their rate structure. No guarantee that high demand charge that we're getting right now can stay on forever. We're going to be looking at paybacks probably in the 10-year range, depending on how we structure this thing. So we got to feel comfortable that we're going to see that $23 a kW for 10 years or more. We'd like to see it more because that's when we start making the additional money. But we can structure a contract so that it's low upfront capital for us and roll that into the contract and just pay it back. So we can get creative with this if we decide to go this way. We could couple it, and I don't want to say we can't, as far as charging those batteries from solar. A big solar array out there, charge those batteries. Now you got to understand, we're going to discharge those batteries pretty quick. You know, when there's a hot week, we're going to be running load management. We could be running it twice a day. We could run it in the morning and run it at night. So we got to be able to recharge those things. Now we can do it sort of a combination where part of it's done from solar during the day and we're recharging them, and then we'll augment that with power from Duke Energy. It's a possibility, but you got to understand the payback for the batteries is going to be in 5 to 10 year range. Now you're adding the solar on top of that to get that. And remember, we're offsetting 2 cent electric energy. So it's really hard, the 2 cents, for the solar to ever pay itself back, but it's a decision we can make. We can do partial charging, where we only put a small amount there, we charge as much as we can, we live with that, we augment it from Duke, or we could put 100%. We can build a solar field out there that is gonna recharge these batteries from zero, completely discharged, full charge. Very extremely expensive. So we ran through the cost right now, it'll be about $600. Every time we want to recharge those batteries, it's only gonna cost us $600. That's pretty darn cheap. For 10 megawatts, for 2-3 hours, that's pretty darn cheap. And you think about it, we're gonna offset that. That's the savings that you're gonna be sitting there saying, we're gonna pay off that solar investment. That's the energy that we're offsetting. So really difficult. But I did put up two of the options down here and just threw some ballparks at, if we did 1 megawatt of solar, recharge that 10 megawatt thing, it's obviously not going to fully charge it. But you're going to pay approximately $1.5 million for the solar array, probably $1.4 million for the 7 acres. We're going to need to get 7 acres near a substation. So we got to look around the areas and say, hey, we want it close to our substation so we can charge these things, because that's where we're going to put the batteries. So it's got to be close, it's got to be 7 acres, and we're still going to have to top off batteries from Duke. So it'll be something less, whatever we charge up with solar minus, maximum $600. Or we can fully charge. And this is where it starts getting really crazy. To get a 10 megawatt system, we're going to need about 15 megawatts, 15 million for the solar array, 14 million for I believe this was the land purchases. It's estimating that out for 78, we need 78 to charge that. But that gets a little crazy. And next screen.
Is it possible to minimize that little box?
Seems like all the important stuff, right? Keith?
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
I like that.
That's great. It's great.
So I just want to show you a quick picture, sort of the plan for bulk expansion. So the green dots here, this is our East Williams. That's our Lower Duncan, that's our Mount Zion. The red dot up there is the 4th substation we're planning to build. We're trying to get land for now to build out in that area. From a design perspective, this is fabulous. As a reliability engineer, I love the way it's configured. We're going to feed into it. We're going to have very short feeders. From a reliability perspective, phenomenal. You got to get that site. Now, you see these big green lines? These are basically the transmission lines from Duke Energy. So when we build the substation, we got to build it in these big boxes. We got to find land somewhere along these lines, because we can't build. What do you think about we put a substation right here and have to build a transmission line? I'm sure you're not going to like the complaints you're going to. You think the water is difficult? You're trying to get that line. You try to get a transmission line out to this place. Duke Energy is saying at best a few years ago it was 10 years to get a line extension built, get it approved and built. 10 years. So understand that that's a very long process, and there's no guarantee you're going to get it unless you go through condemning, which is highly likely that you're going to have a few of those locations that you're going to have to condemn to get that. So we look at all those spots, and here's the 2 circles. Like at 70 acres, that's about what 70 acres looks like. But we're going to have to clear cut to get to the solar one aspect. And if we needed 50 megawatts of solar, which was the other option, to fully charge 10 megawatts, that's what you're going to look at as far as clearing a field. So we're going to need, depending on where we put those batteries, we need to take that circle, we're going to need to clear that way and put that much solar panels out here. Doesn't seem possible. So again, those areas where you're seeing all these circles, that's where we have to find land. Now, I will throw out there, and one of the things we're going to be looking at is with the EVs coming on board, and I think there's a following slide where we're going to need capacity. We truly believe that we're going to go to 100% EV in 10 years. Okay, you want to flip to that one, or let's go to the next one. We'll talk about it when we get there.
That concludes our presentation for today.
That's the good part.
Come on.
I know I did it when exploding.
You were working good. Oh, because you closed that other one. Okay, I was it. Next one. Okay, we'll go into this. I know we got a slide coming up and talking about that. As far as what we see on the books right now, as far as maintenance for our substations, part of our strategic plan is we need to continue to maintain our facilities. We haven't done a really good job. Part of it is because our system's relatively new. The absence of East Williams, the other substations are relatively new in utility talk. So they haven't had much, we haven't shown them much love. But we transitioned that 2 years ago. We started with our East Williams. We rebuilt everything in our East Williams substation. So everything there we feel comfortable with. These two substations, we need to start looking at upgrades. And so what I've listed is some of the things that we've got planned. We're replacing the reclosers in our Lower Duncan substation. We had a failure on one of the bottles in one of the reclosers down there this past year. And it was the first we had seen it. And so we were going to go through, we were going to do some testing. We went to the manufacturers and they said, listen, you can go through and test it. They don't have the cycles on them. Nothing really popped that said we really need to maintain these things. But just because of the age and that we had one fail, we need to start looking at replacing them. So we've replaced all the other ones. The other substations, everything's relatively new. This is the only one that's got those out there as a risk. So we're going to get rid of those. We're going to standardize. So we're going to change those out. It's about $150,000 to do that. The regulators, we've already overhauled those these past years, so they're in really good shape. Regulators are things that adjust the voltage automatically. They've got a lot of moving parts, and they've got oil in those things, and the oil burns. And when the oil burns, it degrades its insulating capabilities. Problem is, unless you test that oil on a regular basis, which we haven't been doing, you don't know the status of it. But general practice is after 10 years, you should be sending those out to get the oil pumped out, cleaned up, put back in. So we started doing that. We did it all in East Williams. We did all of them last year. The only thing we didn't do is we didn't hook up the skating tools. We've got SCADA down there, so we got a contractor who's going to come here. It's going to upgrade the SCADA so that we can see what's going on with those. And then we have a very big risk out here. We've got 2 high voltage breakers that feed off of the Duke Energy lines. Those are the very expensive breakers. For some reason, when this substation was built, they decided to go with Areva. Areva is manufactured, does not exist anymore in the high voltage unit. We can't get replacement parts. So we're sitting out there with a pretty high risk on those, and they're old. So we're planning on replacing those breakers and relays. We got approximately $500,000 to do that. It's going to be a pretty big job. But we need to get that done for reliability purposes, because if we lose either one of those, we don't have a way to fix it. It's going to be out of service till we replace it. And it's probably on the order of 8 months, 9 months. Now, I don't want to scare you. Right now, we've got the capability of having one of those breakers out and refeeding the town. It's going to get a little sticky during the summer months. We got to switch load somewhere else. We're going to have to monitor it, keep it up, but we're okay. The problem is, again, it's not so much the first order problem, it's the second one. Something else happens on our system when we're in that period for 8 months. Then we have some problems. Then we're going to have some blackouts. So we want to take care of this as soon as we can. As far as our Mount Zion, which is the one right behind our new building, the newest of the fleet, it's in pretty good shape. We got to go through. We're going to replace all the regulator controls. We're going to have everything in the town is going to be similar. Right now, we've got a hodgepodge of controls. Once we get these complete, everything will be the same. So that, again, it breeds familiarity with our line crews. We don't have a lot of problems on our system. When we have problems, that's where you learn. Unfortunately, we don't learn because we don't have problems. The easiest way is I don't want to teach some guy how to use 4 different versions of that when he goes out there in the middle of the night. So we're going to upgrade these controls when we send all these regulators out and get them overhauled, because they're ready to get overhauled. So we got the overhaul of the regulators. We're going to get the new regulator controls, and we're going to connect up to SCADA. So that's what we got planned for 2 of our substations right now. Next one. So talking about some of the issues we're having right now, I think we're all aware of the cost increase in materials. For the last 2 years, we've been paying way too much money for stuff, higher than we have ever expected. And some of the costs you're seeing, transformers, we're paying 3 times more for those things. And again, you gotta understand our rate structure was designed way back when, doesn't have this cost escalation in there to recoup these costs. We recoup everything through energy sales. We're not making our money up. Everything we put in right now, we will never make it up because of the cost increases. The rates just weren't designed with that kind of cost structure. So we got transformers are up. Wires up, and our lighting fixtures. We talked about our lighting change out program. Initially, when we estimated, we were $1.5 million. Now it's well over $3 million, just because of cost. Now, we got a bid coming in next week for the next round of lights. We'll get a better idea of what that cost is going to be on. The good news is I'm getting some indications it's going to be less than we paid last time. It's still more than we paid 3 years ago, but it's going to be, it looks like it's coming down. It's not as sticky as it was before. So we're going to take a look at that and we'll get a better idea of how close we are going to get. Now, we are doing the more expensive fixtures first because those are in the subdivision. But we're hoping that we can get those changed out. We got a contractor. I know it's been slow. We had problems with manufacturing. There was a lot of, we bought a bunch of I call them COVID fixtures. They got shipped out the door. They were missing parts. It was terrible. We went in there. We had a big high failure rate on these things. We brought the manufacturer in there, revamped every one of the fixtures we had in there. And so we're back on it. We got a contractor on board. We're going to start changing them. And material delivery dates. This is what's killing us too, is trying to predict what we need now with delivery dates over a year away. And the industry's struggling with that. And, you know, I had a conversation with the manufacturer this morning, we were bidding on the lights, and he said, hey, what about your transformers? And we told him we're okay, but we've got a lot of orders, and Steve and his group's been doing a great job of staying ahead of it. Any opportunity we get to remanufacture stuff, we're buying it. We don't want to go to China yet. A lot of our municipals are starting to buy Chinese transformers, and that's going to be scary. The good news is I encourage it, because as they buy more of those, it'll free up resources around here. So hopefully, I got my fingers crossed, and when they get those Chinese transformers, that they don't fail. And the problem is you don't know about it till years later. It's not like you're going to put it in service connected, it's going to fail immediately. Maybe 10 years down the road, we don't know. They may start seeing some failure rates from untested. They just don't have any time on these things. So we're trying to stay away from it as best we can. So hopefully, with what Steve and his crew has done to keep our materials coming, we're in good shape as far as transformers and materials, but the prices are through the roof. So we're going to talk about time dependency of use. And again, this is going to start transitioning it sort of in the rates. And again, from the previous slides that you saw the importance of our peak and how we buy that. 2/3 of our power is based on that peak on that one day. So we need to look at how we can transition. Now, the world is transitioning time of use. It's happening now. Everywhere, if you look at every utility, they're all transitioning away from it. It's the only thing we can do that's cost equitable. When we used to recover rates with a flat rate across the board that was based on usage patterns and consistency that we were familiar with, that no longer exists. So now the time dependency is becoming very, very critical, as you can see from our profiles. Depending on when you use that power, we need to transition to it. And the beauty is there's a lot of stuff we can do. And I think residentially, 90-something% will be able to break even or save money with the new rates. And we're still going to make ourselves whole, which is great. It's a win-win for everybody to do this right. I think everybody's going to like it. There's going to be a few losers. We're going to find out about it. The day we change over, we're going to hear about those people. But hopefully we'll come up and we'll talk about transition plans so that people are prepared for it. They see it coming down the road, and we'll see those customers and be able to either educate them or work with them to figure out a better solution so they're not maybe adversely impacted. But they also got to understand that they can't impact our utility bill to such an extent that everybody else has got to pay that. They're impacting our bill too much. So we'll be able to pass savings off. Again, if you use energy off peak, we're gonna lower your rates. Your rates will be low if you use your energy during those periods. Most people, when you look at it, they'll be able to do that. The majority of their stuff. Again, it actually charges users their fair share of their impact to the utility bill. And the big thing, we talk about EVs and residential charging. Time of use is going to naturally drive the right behaviors. If I sit there and I'm going to charge you a higher rate, I can guarantee everybody with an electric vehicle, if they had the opportunity to plug that thing in and program their vehicle, they're not going to plug it in there and sit there and say, I'm paying 15 cents kilowatt hour here. If I plug it in now, or I can pay 6 cents later on. Guess what? They're going to switch at 6 cents. I can guarantee you. There's nobody that's willingly going to stick there, plug it in there. So we're going to get that natural migration if we get time use rates in. So I talked about a transition plan. I've talked to a bunch of utilities about, some of the best practices. Obviously, we're going to AMI. So we're talking maybe, what, 2 years by the time this is fully integrated and we're getting bills out. But what we'd like to do is consider, at least as we transition them over, is allow them to see what the rate will be. If you were using your energy during time of use, we can create it. You can see that this is your usage on time of use, and this is what you're gonna pay right now. It's flat rate. And you can obviously see, and that will allow them time to adjust, knowing that they're gonna get transitioned over. So they can play around with stuff in their house and see what makes a difference. You know, they can turn around and say, oh, shutting off my water heaters or doing this kind of stuff. They can play around with whatever they want to see how they can maximize it. And quite honestly, I think a lot of people are gonna like what they see when they start altering minor stuff around their house. And I think people are gonna get, I had time of use 30 years ago, and I can tell you, you get crazy. You do stupid things that really don't impact it. Because back then I didn't have AMI to take a look and see what the impact was, but it was a big impact to my life because I was willing to run home in the middle of the day and shut something off manually because I forgot it. It really would have made a big difference, even though mentally I was paying 23 cents for that light bulb to be on, and 6 cents off. It was pennies. It wasn't worth the gas for me to drive home and shut it off. I didn't know that. People will be able to see that for themselves. So they'll be able to make those determinations. And I think it's going to be a far smoother transition. One of the things I would recommend, because we do have one, is to develop an interim rate. Basically come up, we can figure out what we think would be a good time of use rate to drive the right behaviors. Figure it out before we're ready to implement it. So when it goes in there, people can start using that rate. And it's probably going to be close. I mean, obviously we can run through the calculation. We won't have the detailed information on usage per se, as far as when they're using it, but we should have enough to be able to figure out what do we want to charge on peak, what do we want to charge off peak. We can talk about off peak. We can talk about EV charging. We'd love to be able to provide a super off peak, so we can come up with 3-tier on peak, off peak, and super off peak. I can guarantee you, there's going to be a bunch of people saying, "Hey, I am never going to charge my car off peak. I'm going to charge it on super off peak." So we'll be able to drive those behaviors just through our rates. So I think it's going to be a great thing once we get this AMI in. Okay, so again, if we can, the time of use in and of itself will help us reduce that peak. Remember that little peak where we're doing basically our load management? We're going to see, based on time of use rates, that it's going to further dip that curve at the top. So we're going to see some savings there inherently because of our rate structure. I put a note here. We got to revamp our whole load management program. It's been out there for years. When I got here 5 years ago, it was broken. We were going to AMI. I said, let's wait and see what that technology brings before we overhaul the whole thing. But there's a lot of discussion, and I don't want to get into them now, but there's a lot of policy decisions we need to make and surrounding load management. We are transitioning our switches presently over to a new technology. We did that because we were fully committed to Census, and we knew that we've got an AMI vendor. So now we picked our vendor for our switches, and we're integrating that with Electricities right now. That's going to be the way of the future. We have a lot of risk out there right now. We've got a lot of switches out there that aren't working, and we're paying people to have them on the side of their house. We don't know it because we don't have the data. We'll have the data, so we'll know where those are. The other thing is the technology that's making them inoperable died about 4 years ago. They shut off the radio communications, and all those switches that we use in radio communications ceased operating. So we've got a bunch of them out there. We know it, but we need to go change those things out. But the technology we're changing them out is a pager system. Now, how long is paging system going to be around? We don't know. We got high risk associated with the remainder of the switches that are on the pager system. So the new generation that we just signed and we're starting to get delivery on are cellular. So the cellular ones are going to be the way of the future. We're going to get them in. We're starting incorporating them. We're going to rewrite and revamp our whole load management program. And we'll have better information based on what's coming in from AMI. But we'll have some recommendations to you what that program should look like to help. Again, that little dip in our peak, that was all due to our load management program. So we know it works and it saves us money. And of course, down here, the EV charging, we can get time of use rates. I believe from a residential perspective, we're going to solve that. So EV chargers, I'll just get into this, charging on peak. And obviously, it impacts our cost. We ran through a whole bunch of exercises. One charger charges on peak, will never make money back from that customer for the rest of the year. Systems can't support, our system can't support level 3 charges. We don't even need to consider it. Those are those large industrial chargers, basically a gas station. The infrastructure needed to build those things is almost on the size of a mini substation. You got to figure out wherever you want to put these things, you got to basically put a mini substation. We're not set up for that. I don't necessarily think we need to be sitting there recharging cars up in short periods of time. Level 2 chargers, we can put them in there. We're obviously putting them in. We just need to, whatever way we put them in, we need to be able to throttle them during peak. We cannot have them fully charging during peak periods. It's just, not to say we can't, but you don't want to see if we're going to recoup our costs, it's going to get ugly for the customer to plug it in. Why would they do it? Why would they want to pay 50 cents, 70 cents a kilowatt hour when they can go home and charge it for 10, right? Yeah.
These are for town-owned EV chargers.
These would be, yes, town-owned chargers. So, and we've got a new two rate we went over, and I think we're presenting it, or you've seen it before. I think we're good with that if we can do what we say. I think we've addressed all those issues in the throttling or charging based on utilization. So,
How would you do that without load management? Like, how would you throttle an EV charger without load management?
a lot of them are programmable, so you can sit there during peaks. You can
Okay, but that requires the consumer to do that programming.
These are our chargers. No.
Oh, okay.
These are
Ours.
Yeah, this is,
Got it.
we're not gonna be anybody that's got their home, they're gonna have to pay for it out of whatever their main computer is. Commercial out there, that's what the bottom point is. There's a commercial one that has to be installed, or put someone over source, puts them up. There's a meter attached to that, they can do just like anything else. We're only talking about there's out here, anything we install. Or
So we transitioned last year in our rate sheets with full recovery on any sort of infrastructure we put in strictly for a car charger. So more commercial customer comes up to us and says, hey, I'm a Target, I want to put a charger here. It was a commercial customer. Generally, we'd recoup it through our revenue sales, and we didn't charge more for it. Now we charge 100% upfront. So if you want that charger there, we're charging that customer upfront to pay for everything it takes to install it. So at least we're made whole that way, and we're not trying to make it through energy sales. And then how they get billed, or again, that's still a little crazy because we can either set a meter there for that facility, and we can do it two ways. Set a meter there, so they got another meter charge, or it'll come through their facility and it'll be on their central meter. But either way, they'll end up having to incur the cost, and they can do whatever they want, whether they give it free to the customer or they charge it, and it'll be up to them.
But at the end of the day, that will only cover 1/3 of the bill, right? Our bill.
We do our rates right again commercially. Yes, we got to make sure that we recover our rates.
Whole thing, right?
Next, okay, so I just ran through a scenario. We talk about, 10 years, everybody says, oh, no, there'll be no gas cars around. So what does that look like? So we've gotten some residential customers that come to us with plans, and the solar companies are coupling solar with EV charging, and they're coming in with a home charger that's dual part. You're gonna have two cars you're gonna be able to charge, because if it's 100%, you're gonna have at least two cars. It's about a 20 kW system that they're looking to install, and level 2 revenue to be able to handle that. So even if we degrade that a little bit, we're basically estimating is that every home that has a charger is an equivalent from our planning perspective of another home. So when you put a charger in there, it's like you just connected a new home to that transformer. So from that perspective, every house that's on a transformer, typically we'll put 5 on a 50 kVA, whatever. You instantly have 10 homes on that. So that transformer can't handle it. It ain't gonna happen. So we know that there's going to be an increase in the size of those transformers to be able to handle all those homes basically doubling in size. So if we were to look at 100% conversion to EVs, that's basically every home is going to be looked at as 2 homes now. So Apex goes from 27,000 residential customers to 2 times 27,000. So we basically used that and said, okay, again, we're not gonna get devil into the details. That translates into, you know, the substations that are repeating all those homes, we presently got 3. We're gonna have to double that, right? We got a 4th one planned, we're gonna expand 3. So we're looking at least 2 additional subsites that we're gonna need potentially to build to satisfy that capacity. So we're saying right now, if we truly believe this, we need to buy, remember I showed you those transmission lines? We need to buy 2 subsites and get it set up. We don't have to build anything. Land is disappearing instantly around here, and the value is going through the roof. It's a zero risk. We buy it now. We hold it. We can sell it later if this never comes to fruition, if we don't need it. But we need the land now. So we talked about Perry Road. There's probably a good spot at Perry Road. It's right across the highway from a transmission line. We can get a tap across. That may serve as one good site. But we're going to need to at least invest in land for another site.
But to be clear, that's 3, because we still haven't bought the 4th station site, so we need a total of 6. And we think we have the place for 1 at Perry Road, so we still need 2.
And I'm not saying we build anything with it, but you got to get the land, because guess what? We wait 5 more years. How much land do you think is going to be in those areas? It's disappearing quickly, and the price is going through the roof. So we need to at least hedge our bets, reduce our risk, buy the land, and just sit on it. So, you know, I just ran through some rough costs. And again, I said 20% of our installed cable system is going to have to be changed out. We're going to have underground cable that's going to be stressed. So I just picked 20. Probably going to be more than that, but I said, let's just for argument's sake, 20%. Transformers, they're going to be stressed. I mean, pretty much right now, we went, when we've used our planning criteria, we were pretty aggressive in putting homes on transformers. And the reason was, over the last few years, believe it or not, load's been going down on average because of LEDs and technology and efficiencies. So the market really hasn't seen, you know, when a house goes in there, it hasn't been these dramatic spikes in energy usage. So it's been actually dying. So we've hedged our bets and we put more homes than we probably should on the transformer. It's been okay. That's going to die. That's going to change. We have to change. So I estimated about 8% of our installed residential transformers will have to be changed out. They'll have to be upsized.
So transformers, by the way, the way you stress them, is it just the amount of power that's flowing through it? Because I figure people are going to charge their EVs at night, which is the low peak compared to what you're showing. So like, if it's kind of all this, it's not double the house, it's all kind of evening it out more, right?
It's not double, but problem is with EV charging, especially for time of use and we drive the right behaviors, we're going to pretty much guarantee that they're all going to be charging at the same time.
Yeah.
The diversity on 100% EV charging, everybody's going to be plugging their net.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of diversity. You know, 5 homes, we get away with it now because of the diversity between houses.
Okay.
You know, everybody's not using, there's not a whole lot of stuff. Really, the big users are their AC units. And we know in the heat of the summer, they're probably all running. So we know that's probably 100% of the AC loads in there, plus whatever other stuff they got going on. And on top of that, guaranteed, they're all going to be plugged in around the same time.
But so not every car is going to be plugged in at the same time, right? Because not every car needs to be recharged every single day.
The issues you can't control, it's kind of like water demand.
Yeah.
Unless we have ordinances that says you can't plug your car in at certain times. It's kind of like irrigation. We go to every other day irrigation because we try to control the peak of water usage, because back to the water plant only has a peak amount. So it's a matter of, it's the ability to serve your customer whenever they plug in, and you have to have that maximum amount available. Otherwise, you know, it'd be kind of like you go into your faucet and turn it on, and it'd be at the time we decided that we couldn't have everybody getting water, now you can't take a shower, or you're in the middle of your shower and your water. It's kind of like the rolling blackouts. Unless we want to look at that type thing, you've got to provide the full power availability.
And when I say 80% of these transformers, I'm not saying that I got a 50 kVA there now, double the size, I'm going to put 100. It's probably going to go with the 75 kVA. We're not going to double the size of the transformation, but we got to increase the size of the transformers there. So it's going to have to be pulled out, but we're going to have to put a larger size there, but it won't encroach upon, because we're estimating it as another house, because of the diversity. We're only looking at about 80%. And again, these are on residential. Commercial is a different story. We really didn't get into looking at sort of the impact of commercial. I'm not sure what it's going to look like. But again, these are just rough numbers. I think we've come up with a scenario that sort of fits that discussion. 2 additional substations from at least a land perspective right now. As load grows, we'll have to add those. So we have about 450 miles underground primary, 20%. You multiply it out, it's about $15 million in cable upgrades. About 5,500 service transformers at 80% needing upgrade. That's about $30 million right now. $30 million. That's expensive. And these are increased escalation. We never saw these prices before. They're sticky. They're not moving right now. As a matter of fact, they seem to be getting a little worse. But that's sort of what we're looking at when we say, hey, we got to do this. Magically, everybody's got car chargers. So then we looked at land for the 2 substations, about $2 million, 2 substations, $6 to $10 million. So ballpark, again, it's going to impact the system, we know it. And we're looking at about probably $57 million. So again, this is just these are all the transformers we have on our system right now. The majority of them are 37.5, they're smaller. We're going to end up, and again, we're going to reuse a lot of this stuff. That number there, although I put it in there, wasn't buying a new transformer. It was taking what we got here, shifting those down, taking the larger ones that we're pulling out, pushing them down, and we're gonna do it smart. We're not just gonna trash them. We're gonna take bigger ones, we're moving down, and we're just augmenting what we'd have to do to get the larger sizes. Next sheet. Okay, that's sort of where mine stops. It's on you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric. For those who don't know me, my name is Paul Broussard. I'm a budget and performance analyst in the budget department, perhaps somewhat surprisingly. I'm going to be speaking to you briefly about some of the work we've done to estimate the costs for some of the proposed public EV chargers, and just sort of walk through a couple of different scenarios. One based on a board where we charge the public for usage of the chargers, and one where we provide it for free. Some background information before we get started with that. A lot of this information, there's a number of different scenarios that can sort of come out of it. So we tried to sort of stick to what we feel is the most likely scenario, and with a bit of best and worst case evaluation thrown in there as well. There's a number of factors that we also sort of try to work in here as well. Maintenance costs, installation, network premiums, if we charge for it. And we sort of try and take that into our evaluation to project how much we expect it to cost and then how much we would need to charge in order to recoup those costs. Like Eric said, given the state of infrastructure right now, it's probably unfeasible for us to have level 3 chargers installed publicly. So for the purpose of this analysis, we'll be looking at level 2 chargers specifically, and we'll be focusing on the proposal of replacing the 10 chargers that we have currently, so around the city, not all of which are used for public, but making them available to the public. So the first sort of scenario that we look at is one where we charge for public use of those future charged or future installed public EV chargers. The analysis is sort of up here. You can look at the variable cost over here. That's the amount of cost that we would sort of be incurring just from the electricity that is used by the public. And then the fixed cost over here, which is the specific cost of the installation of the chargers, and then the recovery that we have to make up to order to make up for that within 10 years. We would need to expect to generate around $700 to $800 a month per charger to break even over that 10-year life cycle.
And that takes into account making up for the installation costs, the maintenance costs that we would project to come along with it over time. And then, of course, the electricity that is being generated and the network premium that comes with it as well. Right now, we are estimating a 10% network premium, which we feel is the most likely scenario to come out of that. But that can also go up or down depending on the vendor that we contract out with. This sort of breaks things down specifically into a little more detail. It's how much we would have to charge per kilowatt hour in order to recoup our costs. The low end, sort of the best case scenario, we could afford to charge as little as 0.327 cents per kilowatt hour. The high end goes up to 0.55. This largely is based on the load factor, so how much people actually end up using the charger. So as the load factor increases, the amount that each kilowatt hour we have to charge for each kilowatt hour goes down. We could reduce this cost significantly by about, of course, by restricting charging during peak hours, so throttling that, or just restricting it, right? And only allowing people to charge off peak. So our recommendation for this particular scenario would be to set an initial rate of 0.139 cents per kilowatt hour, and then heavily throttling or outright not allowing charging during peak hours. That allows us to provide charging for as little as possible, while still recouping our costs and making this not a loss. If we do not restrict charging during peak hours, or don't heavily throttle it at the very least, we would recommend charging upwards of 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and that can be adjusted down based on the load factor and how that ends up playing out over time. So basically, both of these scenarios, we're sort of starting with what we would assume to be the worst possible case scenario, and then adjusting down depending on what the load factor is as time goes on. Second scenario looks at a instance where we do not charge for public use of our future installed EV chargers at all. So if we provide EV charging at no cost to the consumer, we can expect around $100,000 over those 10 years per cost per EV charger. So basically, we would be incurring roughly $100,000 for every EV charger that we have installed. Again, if we restrict charging during peak hours, we could reduce that cost by about 3/4. Put that somewhere in the ballpark, around $30,000 per charger over those 10 years. The actual math is sort of broken down here, but to sort of simply, we would again recommend, if we do go this route, we at the very least throttle charging during peak hours significantly to prevent the town from incurring costs of hundreds of thousands of dollars and more likely millions of dollars over the course of the next decade on this. Any questions on that before I hand it over to Amanda?
Just to recap, so you're saying $100,000 per year per charger, so with 10 chargers, the assumption.
In the lifetime.
Oh, with a lifetime.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 100,000 per charger over 10 years. So the subsidy is basically $100,000 a year for 10 chargers.
Yes.
And most
For
of
10
that,
years. Per charger.
yeah, but he just, and most of that is coming from charging during that peak window.
Yes.
That's super expensive for us.
Which was how long? Yeah, was it an hour a day? You said, or
It can range, right, Eric? I mean, the peak time, it could be, it could,
It's a point in time, right?
it's a point in time,
High
but,
speed.
but you don't
It's
know,
our usage at high speed.
but you don't know when it is. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, we don't know when it is, so.
Duke will let us know after that.
Like it was 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I think July's date, I think it was like 6 p.m. or 28 or something like that. So I mean, it could be 6 p.m. It's not necessarily, most time you would think, oh, your AC's running 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but It's actually 6 p.m. Yeah, so you have a win, so when I said it's a point in time, but you have a window going back to what Eric mentioned as far as when we're trying to follow that chart, that mean, that you're looking at a window that could be 4 hours, 6 hours, whatever it may be.
So we're basically, we did restrict this, restricting 4 to 6 hours of use randomly to try to address that. Is that correct?
I mean.
Well, it's predictable by season, so we know when those are. There, again, we can get more complicated if we wanted to, and, we do have load control where, we're sending signals right now. We don't send the signal, Electricities does. But if we had some sort of control mechanism, we could selectively, a day like today, this is not a peak day. I mean, there's no sense. But if I have to program something in, there's going to be periods during a day like today where you're not allowed to, you don't want to charge. If we set up some sort of control mechanism, which we could, it's just the devil's in the details because they really don't exist. There's technologies we could implement and say, hey, this is what we want to use, whether it's using our time of use switch and just shut the thing down, or sending a signal to the computer because it's all computer based. Somebody can write a code that says, hey, when I get this signal, I go into throttle mode. And we'd have to get somebody to actually work to integrate that. And we can selectively pick it so we're not just broad basing it and saying, hey, in the winter, 6 in the morning to 9:30, 10, it's going to be throttled, shut off. In the summer, we're not in the summer and the shoulder months, we could have a morning and a night. So we could do a better job if we.
Typically, we can narrow it down to, based on, but historically, we can typically narrow it down to a window. We may be off, so we may get hit heavy on one side, or the other side, but typically we can.
I don't want to get too cute here. If we're talking about turning off, I think it's important that it be consistent so that EV users.
They know, because they want plugged in and then it turn off like a minute later when they're gone, right?
I mean, the idea is they would know over time.
Yep.
Apex chargers don't work between 5 and 6 p.m.
They know that they'll
Don't charge.
And we're not even saying, hey, man, I think the option, most of the chargers are programmable with throttle. We can put it in there so that somebody can connect in there. It's not like you got nothing coming in. It's probably just going to be a little bit. Yeah, it'll be in there. It'll click your little lights on your dashboard and say it's charging. Just not going to get you everything you want.
Or increase rates during that time.
Well, and that's the other, and that's the other piece. And that was one of the other recommendations. So you got this range of recommendations. So
Do you variable rates?
I think most places where I go, they tend to do variable rates. But the question I have is with regard to, I guess, the management of the rates and things like that, are we incorporating, whether it's high end or low end, are we incorporating, the price of like who is managing that as well? Because I know that we won't be managing that aspect. We'll contract that out.
That's that network.
That's part of the analysis.
Okay.
And so that cost is captured.
Okay.
I would prefer, honestly, because the time would be so inconsistent across the year. That's a little more confusing compared to adjusting our rates. That's just my thought.
I know when I plug in now, it'll tell me, hey, this is the rate for this particular unit at this particular time. So if I'm charging someplace, it'll say, hey, you want to charge now? It's costing you 23 cents, per kilowatt hour. You charge, 2 hours later, it could be, 13 cents per kilowatt hour. But you get it's kind of like an Uber. You get a flex, you're going to get a charge based upon demand.
So that'd be the time of use.
Yeah.
Time of use rate. Like you don't want to flash, you could do time of use. It's about the technology you put in there.
And then, the rate could be 0 in the middle of the night, right? Yeah. And 50 cents, during, between 5 and 6 on Wednesday, July, whatever. But you still need to manage that. So is it all upfront programming or is that, kind of like in the moment, that gets decided.
So the companies I've talked to, that's part of that managed contract where they bill it and it's sort of on, they don't have to come out, it's sort of on the fly over the air kind of stuff. You can set up schedules. It's highly flexible on how they do that. And obviously the rate structure, you can change that throughout the day. Or seasonally, you can set it up as a seasonal thing. Something that would be part of that discussion with them when we set it up. And it'd be included in that network charge that they talk about.
Do anything to add?
Not especially on that particular. One thing I would just briefly add, and apologies, it's a little off topic, to go to the, if we pursue offer this for free, one thing we will need to monitor is the expected demand. So we've built into this an assumption that demand will increase by about 15% if we offer this for free. Because people are more willing to.
No additional cost to the consumer. It's
Yeah.
not free.
My apologies to if we don't charge the consumer. So that is an assumption based on other towns that have attempted to provide something similar, but we would likely need to monitor that for ourselves and adjust over time.
I would, and I'll make a good point, and I would also add to that. I believe we're probably more likely to be installing more EVs or more EV chargers than other places. Just with our own requirements that we have in our UDO now. We were putting down at Public Works, we had it at the electric facility, they're going over here at Mason Street. Now, even though the other part of this is some of these are really, some are maybe public facing, but some of these are for town vehicles. So guess what? How many times have we seen someone charged at electric facility? I've seen out here, not counting Mr. Gray, I've seen out here, several people come and just plug up.
Because it shows up on the map, like, it actually shows like, you know, it's done public works.
Yeah, I had one,
and then
actually, I had one guy out here the other day just trying to figure it out a few weeks ago. And he didn't have the right adapter or whatever else. He's like, shut up on the map. It's like, these are town vehicle ones. He's like, that's probably why I didn't. But he was telling me to show up on the map. But I've seen people getting charged. Well, my recommendation would be if we move toward a charge, there's time of use or flat, which it doesn't matter, whatever it would be. Even our own charge. Our own, we expect to put 10 vehicles on. There's a system mechanism for capturing a charge. We have to pay for our own gas right now. Just pay for it. Yes, it's back. And that way,
Up to the department.
that way, right, it would just bill out to the departments. But that way, we wouldn't be worrying about putting signs or having to deter the public from doing it. Actually, you would open up availability to the public. Our cars are there, we'd like to be able to charge them. But if someone pulls up and they want to charge, okay, they can charge if they're willing to pay whatever that rate is. That's, then you're not fighting back and forth. And I think it increases the number of chargers available as well. Since we definitely are installing for our. That's my recommendation in terms of how you approach the rate piece. And we're going free. I won't bother putting the
I will say free creates problems for staffing.
Yeah.
I mean, fires, like say Mason Street in a few years when as it transitions, its fleet over to electric, they roll in the afternoon, they need to plug their vehicles in, so they'll charge overnight so they can roll out the next morning. And there's cars parked there, they can't charge, they go home and their vehicles aren't charged the next morning. So we've got to think about that aspect as well, so that our town services can still be provided the next day, because they're going to need to charge overnight. We've had the same thing in Public Works, where we've got, the meter readers charged, but we've had individuals come in and plug their car up at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then when they get back from the route, they can't plug in. And then the next day they're having to drive a gas vehicle because the car's not charged.
I mean, my preference is not to offer for free, but to, I like the idea of time use. So that We want to eliminate the problem, but at least reduce the problem. But that,
I'm okay with charging, well, I'm just concerned that time of use of variable rate isn't actually gonna accomplish the goal we're looking for, is that it can reduce the peak demand. I think people just pay it, and then we're not fully recovering the additional cost of town, we have all the EV chargers going at the point, right? It'll be hundreds of thousands of dollars, the fact that they paid $40 instead of $5 doesn't help us, right? So,
So you rather,
I like the first bullet here where we throttle during peak hours, right? So we still charge, right? But we throttle, so we don't see the, you know, the big bill at the, you know, back end.
I guess what I'm saying is our contract with Electric City is our contract too. Kind of seems unavoidable that we have to throttle during that time, like it's just not sustainable otherwise, because the costs are so high that we sort of have to throttle. I like the idea of giving something, so in case there's energy that gets to drive home. I'd like to be consistent, so people don't have to guess as to whether it's gonna be throttled or not. They know that it's earlier, 5 to 6 PM. That's not the great time to use the town chargers, you know, come later, come earlier, you know. Or if we can narrow it down even further to like 15 minutes or something, or half an hour, then, you know, it's not even that big of a deal. It's just for that little period, you're eating dinner or something, just charge. But in terms of usability, you know, I think our contracts with Electric Cities kind of dictates a lot of the policy choices we have to make here as we look to scale this up to be larger town like that.
That's actually one of my questions, Eric. You mentioned the $23 rate with Duke, right? How long is that rate locked in for?
That's a year, we've got the 5-year projections, but
yeah, I think we got 2 more years on the current contract. And then there's negotiations will be starting very soon, because it'll take a long time to get it. So we're 2 years on that. We don't know what the next rate would be. There will be real negotiation. Duke is trying to merge 2 of their entities into one. That's going to change the dynamic. Lots of other stuff. So, but the 2 years, and then the thing is, there's true up at the end of every year too. So that if you don't meet a certain, you know, threshold projection, you get a true up. We just got a $53 million true up this past year. That's going to create a 4.7% increase for our fees going in April.
But what, was that because we didn't use enough energy? Or what was the true up charge?
It's from Duke.
it was mostly fuel adjustment. It was the cost that
Like,
They-
their costs are higher and they're able to pass some through.
Yes.
yes, they pass it all up to us.
So even when you have the 23, I mean, yes, that rate's there. It's,
So how much of a true up did we just have?
not the Electric Cities.
Oh,
Electric Cities.
that makes more sense.
Electric Cities, sorry.
It's like,
Yeah. $53 million. It's three and some change for us though. It's basically a whole extra month.
that's 10% of our budget.
You got a whole extra month.
As long as we're on the topic of Duke rates and the contract. I got really nervous when I saw that Duke raised their rates to their customers by like 30% or something. Makes us look really great for like this year and next year. But do we anticipate that when the contracts are renegotiated, that a lot of those costs will pass to us and then our customers will then see in a couple of years, 30% increase from Duke?
It's likely. I mean,
I'm not gonna get better, right?
yeah, I don't think it's gonna get better. What's likely to get better for it, rates is not gonna get better. What's likely to get better for us is back to it's not generation anymore, the resources that we're allowed to have. We can probably we'll probably be allowed to increase
Raise
our capacity on that. So instead of the 10 that we have, we hope we would have more. And that would allow us to, you know, control that.
Is Duke trying to incentivize us to add this capacity in order to help out?
Oh, no, they don't want us.
They don't?
They don't want us to have it.
And
Because then that's money out of their pocket. I mean, you know, they've been fighting against it.
And so to what end can like residential solar, town solar that we already have installed? Right, because you talked about, you know, okay, refill operation, we're gonna, you know, cut down a forest, put solar in place, you know, to rate of 10 megawatts, right? But we already have, you know, solar panels on our roof here. We have, you know, more and more solar coming into town that's, you know, net metering will give back at some point, right? To what degree can we use existing capacity to offset that, or, you know, to generate a 10 megawatts that we're looking for, right? Just maybe with a battery system as a backup, or as the the real control point.
So Eric's gonna be the expert on it, so let me try my stab in there, Eric can jump in, is any residential solar and then our solar, it's that unit and your savings is your house or our building, it's nothing for the system. It's not loaded in, especially the way our what building is set up right now, it's definitely not even for our system. It's not offsetting.
But you're giving back, right?
No.
Like that metering, you're giving back to the grid.
Only if you use more, generate more than you use.
Right. So
Would be done.
like,
Yeah, we, like I was saying,
okay, that's,
yeah, you're typically, yeah, okay, and you're not, it's too small, and that's what Eric was pointing out, the amount that you need to do this is tremendous.
And Eric's dying to say time is the issue too, right? Like
Right.
the peak is gonna be new, the sun's the highest, and our peak that the peak before is
it's like 6.
4 PM, 5 PM.
And so on the topic of solar on our roof, we have the results of that study that you were talking about a couple months ago, like in terms of additional capacity.
on the solar. It's 250 pages, and I just had to reduce some stuff, so I started redoing it today. And so hopefully we'll have something that in a couple of weeks we can share.
All right.
So we do have it.
Just have a question about the overall cost of the conversation for, like our fleet looking long term. And I just think about like the police vehicles, we bought EVs and they can take home. How does that work?
That's
That's a great question. That's already been kind of, that's on the list that we know we're gonna have to figure out. We know what council's directions, we know what our goals are in terms of clean energy, carbon footprint, all the things. Public safety, public safety in general, public safety in large vehicles, large equipment, really have to be the last we tackle. Because there's a lot of, one, technology is not there yet for some of that. But then two, you get into a lot of complications about how does that work? Because the model we use right now is just in terms of take-home vehicles. There's a lot of complications with that if you have.
Because I think when you deploy at home, right, we compensate the, staff for that.
But it's almost like a cell phone stipends, I get $90 from my boss for a cell phone. I don't use $90 necessarily, right? But 1 month I may, 1 month I maybe a little bit less, right?
So there's, those will be, there's things, those are things we know we'll have to tackle and we'll have to do that as we go. The low hanging fruit is the full cars, full power, and stay around, go from point A to point B. Transitioning those to at least hybrid, definitely going toward electric.
That's one of our priorities, doing the analysis to map out what that timeframe looks like, to look at where that infrastructure needs to be. And then is there existing infrastructure that needs to be upgraded in order to support a long-term plan?
Thank you.
Keep it close to our 30 goal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
515 would be great.
All right, we might do there. So we'll move on here to the solar piece is not in depth. This is really kind of a quick overview. Eric has some talk, Linda has some talk. The idea of this is again, not setting rates. You've heard of kernel solar already. What we really need to get to is the direction on what kind of billing model. It's not happening right now. In at least 2 years. Because we have the AMI and our ERP in place. But if we're talking about changing behavior, if we're talking about how to communicate, we need to know where we're headed so get systems set up properly and develop our communications plan. And not raise, already heard of it, so this is a recap on all stuff and maybe which we got to get some good feedback on EV. I appreciate that. We'll summarize here and make sure we're.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Don't expect a detailed answer here. Has there been any effort in looking at other types of renewable energy that could possibly generate some sort of electricity
Not other than the show,
other than solar?
solar and generator.
Yeah, I don't. Wind is obviously not an option for us, and obviously there's no hydro here. I don't know that there's any other technology in place yet. Now, again, renewable versus clean is a whole other story. And, we talk about what our energy breakdown is, and vast majority of our energy comes from a nuclear plant, which is clean energy, so that's the other piece. That's another.
Why do you say that means,
We're in the least windy part of the state, right here,
Yeah, it's not,
and one of the sunniest parts of the state, frankly.
it's just not physically, the physics.
Also the airport.
Yes.
We have to be so high up to get to it.
The idea is just there are always technologies that are coming out, new
We
technologies.
would definitely be open to technologies if this is better. When you come, what do they look like? Outside of stuff, I to Eric's point earlier on the resource, looking at the new diesel generators are not something we want to, even the gas stuff, natural gas, maybe you're still using fossil fuel, you're still using carbon. The idea on the battery is at least it's being powered by what we already have, which we know is the majority of clean energy from the power plant. So the battery itself becomes, it's a storage unit. So that was kind of the cleanest option at this point to invest, best return on that.
And it all goes back to that being dispatchable. So it has to be an energy that we can push it around
Yeah.
and make it dispatchable. Really what we're trying to do, all we're trying to do, we're not trying to be a power generator all the time. We're just trying to drive that peak down because that peak hour. So the problem with turbines, the problem with like wind or solar is what if it's cloudy, what if it's not windy? And you have no guarantee that you can get that 10 megawatts when you push the button. Or and when we're trying to do load management, we may do it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of a really hot week because we don't know which day that Duke's going to select. We just think it's going to be in that window. So we have to discharge, power it back up, and do it again the next day, and hopefully we get that window.
Well, and when I'm talking about specific things, there is technology out there that you literally put it in the road, cars drive over it, and it produces electricity. There are things like that out there that could be explored. That's kind of what I'm talking about. But we're always going to have cars on it.
Yeah, no, I think there are technologies being tested, and we would definitely be open to that. When is it cost effective for what we're trying to do and have that benefit. Rule anything.
In fact, there's Marty first the other day, some of the pavement and cooling and environmental.
We're always looking.
I do the rest of my battery questions now. I'm saving them. When you want to do them all.
Okay. Battery, let's go through solar and then we'll.
Yeah, it's like, I think,
Yeah, I think there'll probably be more questions on this too. So
Yeah.
we'll wrap them all together. So this slide real quick is Duke's transition. They just announced it. We went through the seminar the other day. They explained what they're doing. They're transitioning from their old retail net metering to avoided cost. I think that's the bottom line. They've got a transition rate that they got in here. It's limited in its capacity, but they're moving them to time of use and crediting everybody at avoided cost. And I think they say, I think they might even have told us, I think it was 6 or 7 cents. They might have said what that avoided cost was presently. It gets recalculated every year. We get the number from Electric Cities on what constitutes avoided cost. That's what Duke's going to right now. You can see they're closing 10-1. They're closing their old system. They're grandfathering it for 15 years to help people who made investments under the old finance arrangements. And really, this is what they're going to. This was just something to get through to allow, I believe it was a commission thing to allow sort of a transition to full-time use rates. Solar customer growth. I mean, this shows you what we're seeing as far as growth on our system. I think we've shown this graph a few times, but we got an exponential growth in Apex as far as where we stand. We're up to 950 applicants.
This one's actually updated, so it includes both solar, or active solar and pending. And since July 2023, we're already up to like 975 I think. So, so they're coming in pretty heavy. So I know that's taken a toll on your seat, Eric. But usually we've got historically about 4% a month per.
We're seeing some good growth. Obviously, the solar companies in Apex have no problem selling to their neighbors. Put it in there, it's instant. We're the largest growing. We've done some statistics. We got the highest density of solar per capita in North Carolina and Apex. Far exceed Duke's. That was just something. So these are some of the recommended options. We're talking dual register meters, not bilateral. Nobody does bilateral anymore. The beauty of bilateral, when it first came out, we forced customers to go on it for the first few years. We had 4 customers that wanted solar. We said the only way we can handle this, we forced them to bilateral. It forces you to put 2 meters on the side of your house. There's a cost incurred. You got to wire it up. They got to put a second meter pan. We got to put a meter in there. The beauty of that is there's a benefit to it now. Fayetteville Electric, we're mandated bilateral for everybody. Fayetteville's got 120,000 electric customers. They had, as of a couple of years ago, they had 11 solar customers. 11. So it shows you what that rate did to force people not to participate in it. The beauty of the 2 meters is it allows you to accurately know exactly how much you were generating and how much you get back. Now you can use that 2 meter system and you can create whatever rate structure. I mean, they could have went to any other rate structure they wanted, but they chose to go to avoided cost as well. So they would buy back everything at a lower rate than I was selling it to. And again, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm putting the system on there. They didn't even get the opportunity to use the energy that they got first before it got sent out. So, I mean, that's really was a poor system, and obviously it drove the ball. With the new AMI system, we're going to have 1 meter there. The beauty of AMI is we can put as many registers in there, so it could be 10 meters in one. You know, so we'll be able to do different things. Time of use rates, we can register both directions. So the devil's not going to be in so much the meter; it's going to be more in how we program it into our billing system to be able to take each register and know that this is delivered, that one's received, this was on peak, this is off peak delivered, this is off peak received. So we'll have the capability to create any sort of convolution of whatever rate structure we want. You know, so that's the beauty of going AMI. Net billing, you know, and there's a lot of confusion about net billing and net metering. Duke Energy says they do net metering. They don't. They do net billing. But they say the energy they're generating while they're using something in the house is being offsetting their commercial, the residential wholesale retail rate. That's crazy, but it's a game that they play. When we hear net billing versus net metering, really the difference is being able to charge when the customer sells it back to us, not paying for it at the retail rate. It's paying for it at avoided cost. That's really where everybody's transitioning to. We're one of the few bastions left in the world that says, you buy it from us for 10, we're going to sell it to you. You know, so we need to get away from that. We need to be able to, we'll have the ability to actually credit. You know, obviously, when they're generating solar during our peak period, they're offsetting high cost energy. And when it gets bought back to us, they should be able to offset other high cost kilowatt hours. And I think we all agree that. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, I don't want to buy it back from them. Anything more, I can pay 2 cents for it. So I think we can come up with a good rate structure that still makes sense for everybody. But paying them retail rate, nobody's doing it anymore. Even California decided, hey, guess what? We got a big problem. They're you know, out there leading everybody. They've come to the realization they can't do it. So we've got time of use. I think this is going to be great with solar. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any issue with going to time of use and having solar on your facility. I think in a way it's probably going to help them a lot. Again, we got to get rid of them. We're going to have a minimum bill. can't be zeroing out bills. I think we all understand that. You know, our policy isn't that you don't do it. We just can't handle it now. We will fix that with the new system. And again, the big thing is when you're generating, if you look at that solar curves, I mean, there's going to be periods where they're generating during peak, right? There's going to be peak times when we set up these rates because we're not necessarily just going straight to the peak. We're going to create these windows where they're going to be generating a sizable amount of load. They're going to be able to offset their usage during those periods. So I think it's going to be good for them. And know this. And I think it's more equitable. We'll do it this way. I think we're not cross-subsidizing people who don't have solar, paying for the contributions to solar. There is we got a little note here, carries the risk of manipulation with battery storage, you know, so that was always one of the issues we had. A lot of people, we got a lot of customers. I don't remember the latest number is maybe 30 or 40 that have solar with battery backup. So they can charge their batteries and they can push it back on our system during the peak periods. All right, so they can get paid. Got to keep that in mind that there is ways to manipulate. Don't do the right thing in setting up the rate structure.
But wouldn't that lower our peak demand? Like, isn't that kind of desirable behavior?
It could be.
If your rate structure is set up.
If I can count on them to do it when I need it, remember, it's that one day. All they gotta do is miss that one day of doing it. Doesn't do me any better.
So we could send out like a mass text, right? Saying, now's the time to discharge your battery.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, I mean, again, if we want to create a science experiment, yeah, we can go out there, we can come up with a control system. You give me access to your stuff. Wow, that's a game changer. You know, and quite honestly, battery storage is a game changer. I think that to me is, if we can exploit the batteries and be able to make sure people are using their batteries during our peaks and lowering it, it helps everybody. Trust me, I don't want to pay that $23. I like the 2 cents. I mean, that's good. And, but 23, I don't want. And if we can get people to help us, you know, we talked about, you know, discharging cars, you know, that's ridiculous. Can you do it? Yeah, it's a science experiment. But you're going to have a full car sitting in your, and we turn around, we push a button and say, hey, you know, we need that power of your thing. We drain your battery out. You go there the next day, hop in the car, you got nothing. I mean, is that the world we want to live in? I mean, yeah, can we make it work? Yes, we can. Do we want to make it work like that? That's a crazy model. What else you got there, Gordon? Okay, so sort of we talked about a bunch of this stuff. We're gonna need direction on what we want to do with that 10 megawatts. I think our recommendation was to pursue the batteries as an option, because I think it gives us the best flexibility. I think we can structure it so that if we don't want to put the capital up front to do this, we can work it through the vendors to come up with some sort of finance option, so it's not a big hit to us, and we can take advantage of that 10 megawatts, which is only going to increase over time. So we're going to get more and more capacity in that 10. Actually, right now, Electric City's told me we actually have like 8.9 or something like that. So we're rounding it to 10. Go ahead, put in 20. We don't really care. You know, they said there's so much capacity right now that's not being used in total that we can overgenerate if we want. And by the time they get closer to their caps, our number's going to raise. It's going to go blow past that anyway. So we could always design something different. 10 is a nice even number. We figured we can talk to vendors and say, hey, you know, instead of going to 8, let's go to 10.
Eric, I think we could maybe decide today about the battery thing. I bet there's 3 votes here at least to do that, frankly. But, okay, I mean, do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Let's just, I think it's stickier, but the battery thing.
So what's the useful life on the batteries?
They'll tell you upwards of 20 years.
Wow. I think.
Now, again, the devil be in the details. We'll talk to them about it because they've got guarantees and maintenance. We're going to obviously get full maintenance on this.
Yeah.
And they guarantee outputs, which means they'll probably give us 11 megawatts batteries for the 10, because I know there's going to be some decay, and then there'll be some stuff at the end of life. Obviously, we don't want disposable costs of the batteries. It's all got to be part of it.
We're looking for direction to pursue what the options are.
Do we have to have additional land purchases for the placement?
You don't know. We're gonna try to put them next to one of our substations. Right now, we'd like to put it at our Mount Zion substation, only because that's where we're housed. That's where we can monitor it easily. We've got that storage area in the back that we'll figure out. We don't know what the size of the footprint will be. So once we start getting those preliminaries, we'd like to keep it there.
Cement on the batteries is 5 to 6 year payback. You know, so even if you've got even if you only get 10 years of life, still.
Like pursue options there
With battery versus like natural gas.
with battery.
Yeah. I agree.
Do we need to vote on that or is that just general?
Let's make it, yeah, let's go.
If you want to make it, clarify that.
Yeah. I'll make a motion then to pursue options on battery storage.
All right, motion Mayor Pro Tem,
I'll second that.
second again. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. One down. That was easy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. That'll help me a lot because there's a lot of details. There's gonna be further discussions, obviously. I'm gonna come to you with a bunch of different options. But we'll pursue those. System expansion and future subsites. Talk about a couple of things. I've got 4th subsite we're still trying to buy land for over on 64. We need to get that as soon as possible. The land is disappearing. And we had a couple of subsites early on. I said 4 years ago, we needed them immediately. We tried to play nice. And the person sold the land to somebody else. So we need to get it. It's got to be near a transmission line. You don't want to see the costs if we got to build far off the transmission line. So we're limited. So we need to get that 4th subsite as soon as possible. I want to start construction as soon as possible, which means right now, I ordered a transformer. It's going to be 3 years before that thing's going to be in service. So we're looking at any decision immediately. I'm 3 years down the road before this thing gets built. So we got to get that subsite. We've got it in the budget already, land price. I'm going to build it slowly. I'm going to build one bank. So we're not going to get hit with full construction cost because I don't need both transformers. But we're going to order that one transformer. We ordered one now from Viridian. We're going to expand East Williams right now. We've already got the land there. We're going to get the bids in on that next month. I believe those are coming. We'll find out what the true cost of that transformer is going to be. Originally, a few years ago, we could get it for $700,000 to $800,000. Now they're telling me it's $2 million. So the cost has gone through the roof, and they're telling me it's probably going to be 2-3 years before we get it. So if you got that, you can bid out right now. We'll figure out what that looks like, and that will help direct how we approach substation 4. The other two things that we're looking at, we mentioned about we're going EVs. We gotta buy land. We can look at Perry Road now. If we earmark Perry Road as one site, understand, I know we've got a lot of other things that they're looking to do with Perry. And we're gonna have to block that, basically market. Now, I think it's a good idea because I think as we get clarity and if we get another subsite, we might be able to turn that back over to the town to use for other purposes, but I think that might serve as one site. That's good.
What about the site that's currently has a pump station, that Ferry Road, the pump station is gonna get moved?
So what we're talking about is at the end of Perry Road, right in US 1. Then if we got 49, almost 50 acres there. So if we get one substation there, that's one line across US 1.
Right, there's a sewer pump station there that needs to be moved.
It's not big enough.
Yeah. But we have at least some land already.
But I'm saying we've got enough at Perry Road, and that's the most logical place to go across with the transmission. And then we're also having the facilities master plan study, which we're looking at how the town could possibly use that Perry Road site based on what we determine our needs are for the next 20 years. And this could be just a plug-in component of that to make sure that we did the site, because the substation site, 3 to 5 acres should be sufficient. That leaves 45 acres.
So basically what you need from us is, do we want to expand this or not? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, because any actual decision. Yeah, you all know we've all been working for Duncan. That's been a while. Sorry, that's great. Sorry, out toward Winterly, that's great. We've been looking at any specific side of that. You've heard all the things, the
If you don't want to expand the system, and we look at other options, that's fine. But, yeah.
I don't think you'll.
We don't want Steve Adams spinning his wheels.
To me, it's just reasonable to look for property to pursue this because we're severely limiting ourselves if we don't. So I don't see why this wouldn't be a good idea. So
We'll continue on that.
Yeah, I think I asked a question real quick about that. So I understand strategically you're looking for expansion of, and you're talking about transmission and going across, from California to APEC, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure it's close to another site. I guess I'm trying to look at overall conversation because we also have other priorities in place for land acquisition for affordable housing. So are we going to overlay, are we going to look at that too, just to make sure we're not countering one from the other?
So the only thing I would say is you're not going to put affordable housing next to a site, so we will not put those in. And I can just tell you that one, and two, so the LIHTC we've always talked about, when they apply for it, you get, I don't know if it's, maybe you don't get points, it might be a Dutch, I don't know, maybe, Dimitri and Marlene, but you can't, that takes away from their application. So those would be separate. We're not going to put those.
Are you worried about the dollars or the actual physical side?
Okay, as far as dollars, if we get that, we're looking at, and the good thing is you're separate pots of money, right? And so I don't know that, if we identified a site that looked like, it could be one or the other, yeah, we'll come back and evaluate that financially though, with two separate buckets.
That's good. All right.
I was gonna say, Eric, I love this slide where you kind of gamed out the impacts of the world moving to EVs and their costs. My favorite slide, the whole presentation. I guess one of the stuff I don't like. I like this slide though. I think that's really, really useful.
Cool spot.
Yeah.
Maybe thank you, right?
Yeah. So I think it's great that you thought this through, and I'm in full support of don't aggressively find these sites, but you're right. The land's not getting cheaper. We don't really have much of a choice in terms of what demand's coming for us, and it's necessary. So you have my support on that.
So we done in our code?
I think that's general direction.
Yeah, that's general direction.
So for the rate structure, what are you looking at specifically direction?
So I think in combination, I guess I go in agreement that we're going to transition to time use across the board. You need to do that. I think we made the case based on what we're doing. Yes.
And red.
So, I think everybody sees the need. I think in general, everybody's going to go to it. If not immediately, they're all transitioning over to it.
I like the transition plan. Having a year of seeing those. So, yeah.
And I think, we've even talked about, again, I talked to a lot of other utilities and we're always like, how do we do this? Obviously this wasn't my brainchild. Somebody had talked about it. One of the things was, hey, we can go through that transition period where, hey, if you want, we're going to give you two bills. We're going to show you your regular bill, your time of use bill. You pay whichever one you want, whichever's lower.
Do we have, I thought we have a time of use option today.
We do.
People need to opt in.
Nobody wants it.
Well, why is that?
Because change, it's true, they don't want, it's very, I'll say it's very punitive. When you look at, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think we're charging, let's say rough numbers, 10 cents now. The on-peak was 17 cents, off-peak was 8 cents or something like that. People were scared with the on-peak rate. They're scared. And they just say, hey, I ain't willing to, and like me, I hate, I just want to flip a switch. I don't want to think about it. That's the way I was growing up. I don't want to have to think about being an active participant in how am I being billed.
Here's where I'm going with it, right? So instead of waiting 2 years for AMI to come in, right, and then start educating people, do we need to re-review that rate structure, maybe bring those rates a little bit closer together so it's not the scary factor, right? Let's start that communication and education process now. Hey, you know what? You want to run your dryer? Run it at night because it's cheaper. You want to run your dishwasher? Run it at night because it's cheaper.
That's why we want the direction.
Right,
That's
like,
real.
because we can start it now. I don't think we have to wait until AMI is in
So the
place.
problem is right now, we're no longer off in time. It's on hold.
We don't have the right.
We have it, it's in the books, but we've basically put out, we can't do it because the system that we got installed is got problems. Extended life, can't extend it. So we've got areas right now, we cannot put the kind of meter that we have out there. It won't be read. We can't read them. So we can't sit there and say that you know, the poor people down there in New Hill, because the collectors that are installed down there don't have the range. We go down there, we can't put it in, it doesn't.
So we
so-
basically need
so-
to wait for AMI.
Yeah, so we basically shut it down for everybody, saying, listen, we're not gonna let them have it because it'll work down there and you can't have it over here. We know the system's, and it's broken because we have no more collectors. We lose a collector, we're riding a pretty heavy risk right now in finance. If one of those collectors goes down, we're manually reading it. We're gonna manually read it. That's our only option right now because the vendor does not have a piece of equipment to replace it. We had 2 spares. And we used both of them recently on the problem. So we've got nothing.
So do you want to vote on this or do you need direction on this?
I think it's just general direction, because we need to come back to you with, hey, here's what this building structure, rates and everything actually looks like. The idea, if you want to move for time of use, even to your point, is, I mean, we do want to start the communication, and we do want to start the education piece about, hey, what will be an option, what's coming. So, I mean, I think it's still, it's not a vote yet, because we're not.
There's gonna be a heavy education part, and obviously this, when, you know, when we decide to go down that road, we're gonna be communicating to people about this whole process. And quite honestly, it's a win-win for everybody. I believe most people are gonna, once they get used to it and get on it, their bills.
Yeah, we talked about this in the budget workshop, you remember that? But it was too late. It was like, you know, like back in March or so, there was really no time to make a change. Yeah, I'm good to go explore it.
Same.
And that gives us some ability to start looking at how our rate structures are now, maybe soften what that transition is, right? So it's not as scary. And also, Mr. Your point, maybe soften, you know, if we figure out what our scale is, it's not all of a sudden, and there's this huge 3%.
Right, and then so we can have like rate changes over time too, right? It doesn't need to be like one and done, right? We can say, okay, we set the range fairly close initially, and then over time, you know, as we start seeing the usage patterns change.
Fayetteville Electric, when they transitioned, it was about, I think 5-6 years ago they did it. They went in there, mandated time of use everywhere. Wasn't gonna drive any behavioral changes. I mean, there was a couple of people who freaked out. There was maybe 3 cents difference between on-peak and off-peak. Wasn't gonna drive anybody. All they did was break the seal. And after that, once they got everybody on board, that's what they did. It took them a few years, but now they got the rates to drive behaviors. Initially, again, we're looking to drive behaviors to get people to, you know, charge appropriately. So we want to have a fairly good split when we roll that out, because we're going to be counting on that to help offset the effects that we're getting from residential electric charging.
And I think we need to be very careful.
No,
But saying that people still are gonna get lower, right? Because you also laid out a whole range of, you know, things that are the headwinds, right, in terms of material costs and then all of that, right? We may need to recover every last penny of that in order to keep the utility.
I'm not saying that the rates aren't going to be super high, but, you know, regardless of whatever it is, it's going to be lower under a time of use rate than a flat rate. If we were to
Yeah, but
go
I don't want to set that expectation, right? If I go to time of use, then my bill's gonna go lower because, you know, we may actually set the rates higher to recover, you know, 3x for a transformer, right? So I want to be very careful how we message it to our residents.
So for the EV charger rate structure.
Sound like earlier y'all were all good with charging. I guess the question was whether it's time of use or whether it's a flat rate and just kind of throttle back type thing. So
Want an answer on that right now?
we don't necessarily, it'd be good to know, because I think if y'all are good with moving forward, I mean, we need to replace these chargers out here. We're getting ready to install we're getting ready to install chargers over in Mason. We're going to install chargers down at the cemetery. It'd be good for us to know so we can get our billing, you know, what that structure is. Because we need to, Eric's been talking to companies, we gotta know what this building is gonna look like. We gotta work with Antoine and finance to make sure, you know, we're capturing that. And so, yeah, if y'all have an idea of what you want to see.
We don't have to wait 2 years on it.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah,
We
it's
can
just,
move forward with that, whatever you want us to do.
yeah, we can come back with the fee. We don't need the exact number. But if you know like what you want to do, like if it's flat fee, no throttle, flat fee with the throttle, free, time of use. I think those are kind of four options.
I would say it's worth it all. Like,
We need the option,
Yeah.
right? So the system needs to be set up for billing, right? So there needs to be some billing units, like, you know, one that they.
time of use
Right,
and the throttle.
right.
Because it sounds like even with the time of use, you can be set up super high, we're still not gonna recover a cost if someone plugs in.
The time of use with.
And throttle.
And throttle during that time. And obviously, like, you can kill a lot. I think, I hope we can be consistent that EV users can know that like this is just the hour where it's just not great at the same time. Something they can learn.
Yeah. So we go vote this motion.
Yeah, so
I'll second.
Mayor Pro Tem, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, for the solar rate structure, what do you need?
Listen, that's on you, sir. I got places to be.
So this one, you want to take it? How'd you know? I'm just looking at the calendar, like, I feel like this was a once a year conversation, you guys beat me over the head with this stick, and it's been like 3 months. Like, it's gonna be like every week pretty soon if I don't.
No, what we're looking for now is to kind of get that direction so that as we're setting up our ERP, we know what AMI can do. We're getting our system in place, we can set it up, and then, because we don't want to, oh, hey, we're done, now start education. Everybody's going, we're all gonna say what Eric mentioned. We want to working to that point, so we can flip the switch and we're there, not starting as a kid. So, you know, where you want to go with solar. We've gone over the numbers. We don't capture roughly $400 with solar. Right now, 400, 500,000 be made of that. You know, but that's only increasing. You know, roughly about almost 4% of our customers are solar. For perspective, I think Duke's there's like, it's like less than 1% or roughly 1%. Duke, we have more solar customers than all the other Eastern electricity combined. Like we have like 3 times more than all of them combined. So it's hitting us. I think in terms of the idea has been how do you encourage it, right? Well, clearly what we're doing is encouraging. I also think there are other ways to incentivize. There might be rebate programs. There might be other things that we can do. Look into that. But just like that's what Duke does. That's what other power agencies do. They try and push toward it where you get the benefit of it. But at the same time, you have to figure out what that billing mechanism looks like. We have that base charge because whether you have solar or not, we have a cost to get those lines and everything to your house and to make sure you have power when your solar's not working. You know, we'd like to cover that cost, you know, and then when that's been all the net billing and everything else does. But we're just kind of looking at that general, it's not the rate setting, but the general, that model that you want to use. And yes, we've kind of gone through it. And I think now we're trying to get to a point where we say, okay, let's try and pick the one.
I would oppose moving to avoided cost compensation for solar. I would want to stay with retail cost. I view our discussion about time of use as sort of the compromise solution there. Like we have a time of use pattern, people are compensated based on time of use. So if they're selling back energy, you know, off peak, they're not going to get paid as much. So I thought that's what the conversation was about, is time of use and potential middle road. I'm not opposed to smaller changes to the pricing model, which kind of, you know, recovers some more of our costs. I view going from retail cost to avoided cost to be a pretty big change. I'd like to know that, I mean, I'd like to see the actual cost to us continue to be updated on that. Once it becomes prohibitive, then clearly it's certain points of what final limits.
So I'm with you, but I do think that we need to have that minimum like system charge, right, to offset the infrastructure.
Like a
cost.
monthly fee.
So like there's a base, like, so like if it's $25, which I think it is right now, right? Then, you know, you're not gonna go below $25, right? You can offset everything, you know, up until $25 and then that'll be your monthly invoice. Because, you know, we do have a cost, right? And so I think that to me is a fair compromise. Now, at the same time, I think our system needs to allow for a buyback rate, whether we set it at that, you know, the current retail or, you know, some future change, right? Like the system needs to be built for that, right? Which I think AMI does for us, but just want to make sure that that's in there so we don't find ourselves kind of locked into a system that we cannot change.
Later on, it's, right, I think it's what's kind of business happening. Measure in and out.
Right.
So what's the idea? Like, the way Duke used to do it, I don't know if it's changed now, is like it would roll over month to month and then every spring it would be set to zero. So you would offset your usage, still pay the monthly rate. And then, is that what you guys are proposing? Or would you think that's a fair system? Or just roll over indefinitely until?
I
I
don't know.
mean, eventually we'd have to stop the whole.
I think the only thing about the rollovers is that happens, they go like paying or whatever.
Well, I think the way it works now, if it rolls over, you move out, it zeroes it out, it doesn't get transferred to the new owner kind of stuff. I think just from an accounting perspective, managing that billing system and keeping track is just an administrative burden. The system shouldn't be designed to be selling back to us. I mean, really, the idea is we want you to generate, use it. We don't want to buy it. We are there. We are offering to store it temporarily for you to use it. You know, so in effect, you overgenerate, we store it out here in our system and we let you use it whenever you want, kind of thing. That's sort of the way we, you know, everybody's been viewing it. But, you know, I think at a certain point, you shouldn't be over, you know, we try to tell customers, we don't want you over generating. We really don't want, we want you to use everything that you generate. And we realize the problem is they're not using it when they're generating. And that has been fixed with battery storage. And that is great for them to be able to generate it, store it, and use it when they need it. And, you know, that's perfect. The problem is you're talking systems now that are out of the price range of some in APAC, not all of them, because they seem to be, a lot of the solar companies are making that sale, especially here in APAC, that this is the best way to go.
If you look at the average size in North Carolina and in the United States and in Apex, ours is much larger. But that's because you can oversize your system and get a return on your investment much, much quicker.
Yeah,
Is that what you're trying to say, Eric?
Okay, so what's your recommendation?
I would zero it out at the end of the year, at whatever period it is. Just, and again, it's more for administrative purposes, because I know our billing system has tough enough time just trying to figure out monthly bills, let alone rolling a credit, keeping up with that, and continuing to roll it over. Right now, we let it roll over until somebody changes their accounts.
Do we have a system in place where we do an annual estimate of electric usage and smooth that out over 12 months, right? So that customers don't get hit with a
Billing?
big equal billing, right? Is that something?
They have a budget billing component for utility customers, but it's not something that we don't do that for every customer now.
I think they can request it, right?
They can sign up.
They
So
want
it's
to
by
equalize billing.
request. Okay.
So it's like an equal billing
Right, but
option
then,
and then there's
like,
a true up at the end.
Point being, there is a true up at some point. It's like, so we already have that mechanism in place.
So for the sake of time, Councilman, where are you at with it?
I think our policy now is great. We should get
So our policy being, we buy back at retail rates. Yes.
And then transition to time of use and natural, make that more efficient for everybody.
They also they don't have to, their credit goes toward that base charge.
Yeah, so that I
And that's
would
the-
like to change. Like, I'm okay with buyback at retail rates, right? And we can evaluate over time, you know, how time of use is going to change everything, and then whether we want to adjust our buyback rates at some point in the future. But to keep it attractive to put solar on your roof, like, you know, I think a $25 contribution to the infrastructure is reasonable.
2638
How
base
much?
charge. 2638 is base
2638.
charge.
2638, all right. I'll update my,
Councilman Gray.
my memory.
I concur with what Councilman Zimmerman, I do think that I don't know if we're disincentivizing solar by requiring some of the cost of the infrastructure be paid. I don't think psychologically that is the case. And I think we saw that when Tesla basically charged $160,000 for a car. And people came up with another reason to make that purchase. It was about environmental impacts, other cost savings. I think psychologically.
Just for point of clarification, out of the 900 and some solar customers that we have, how many are actually giving power back? Because we just said that most of the systems are too small to really have a material impact, right? And so I look at some of the new proposed solar installs, 4 kilowatt systems or whatnot, right? Which is not enough to power the average house in Apex, right? So how many of those customers that we have actually give money back or get money back from the town, right? Because of overproduction.
We can get that. I mean, we haven't run it in a while. Every time we run it, we got another 100 customers on there, so it's.
I'm just curious, percentage wise, if it's really just a very small segment of the solar users that have purposely oversized their systems, right? Are we trying to solve for the 5%, right? Or is it 10%, or is it 20%? What are you staring at here, right? I think it's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna throw a number at you, and again, it was an old number that was in my head from a while ago, and things have changed and sizes have changed, but something like 20%. I mean, it wasn't something like every one of them is, we're buying back massive amounts.
Just for the record, I agree with, yeah, so having a base charge, and then as AMI comes in and we adjust things, then we'll look more at the rates and things like that.
Just to be clear, base charge doesn't go negative. That's that fixed rate, and that's designed to carry distribution, fixed costs
Buyback it
at retail.
at retail
Buyback at retail.
and hold the credit for a year and zero out.
Zero out.
I think we're good. What else you need from us?
I think that's it, sir. That's all our points. Share about it.
8 minutes.
Sorry, yeah.
I think we're good. Thank you very much for everything. Very good job, and please thank Paul for it.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Yeah, he did. All right. All right, meeting adjourned. Yeah.